Have you ever felt the quiet humiliation of being doubted by everyone around you, not because you weren't capable, but because they couldn't see what lived inside you? That strange ache of being underestimated, of watching others rise while you're still waiting for your turn, whispering to yourself that maybe they're right, maybe you really are too late, too lost, too small to matter. If that's where you are tonight, stay. Because what if I told you that being doubted by them, by life, even by yourself, is not a curse but a calling? Carl Jung once said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But here's the thing, when people doubt you, they're not really showing you your weakness, they're showing you your hidden strength. Their disbelief becomes the mirror that forces you to decide who you really are when no one claps for you, when no one stays to watch you rise. You see, every person who's ever done something meaningful was, at some point, dismissed, ignored, or laughed at. Not because they weren't good enough, but because their vision belonged to a future others couldn't yet see. So if everyone doubts you right now, your family, your friends, your boss, maybe even your own heart, this is not your end. This is your beginning. Because this story, your story, doesn't start with confidence. It starts with the sound of silence after you've been told you're not enough. It starts when you decide that their doubt will not define you, only refine you. And tonight, we'll walk through that fire together. You'll see the truth about why being underestimated is the very soil that grows greatness, why solitude is not your punishment but your preparation, and how the moments that break you can also become the ones that reveal your power. If this voice finds you in that quiet space, maybe driving home in the dark or lying awake while the world sleeps, I just want you to breathe for a moment. You're not behind. You're becoming. Before we begin, if this message touches something in you, that raw place that still believes despite everything, take a second to follow, to stay connected. Because this space is where we rise, slowly but surely, from the ashes of doubt into the light of self-belief. Now, let's begin. There's a moment in every person's life when the world grows silent. Not the kind of silence that soothes, but the kind that stings, the silence that follows after your ideas are dismissed, your dreams laughed at, your worth questioned. You try to speak, to defend the small fragile spark inside you, but the words fall flat. People nod politely. They don't see it. They don't see you. At first, you tell yourself, it's fine. You work harder. You smile more. You try to prove them wrong. But late at night, when the noise fades, you begin to wonder if maybe they're right. If maybe your dreams were foolish after all. That's the cruelest part of being doubted. It's not just their voices you fight. It's the echo of those voices inside your own head. But here's the truth that most people never learn. Greatness doesn't begin in applause. It begins in rejection. Every doubter, every skeptic, every moment of humiliation, it's all part of the initiation. Life doesn't hand out certainty before the journey. It demands courage first. Carl Jung believed that the human soul carries both shadow and light, and it's only when we are rejected by the world that we're forced to meet the parts of ourselves that the world never taught us to love. When they doubt you, it's not a signal to give up. It's an invitation to go deeper, to step into the parts of yourself that don't need validation to exist. Maybe you're there right now, standing in the middle of a dream that no one else understands. Maybe you've heard the words, "Be realistic," too many times. Maybe you've been told to stop reaching so high. But the truth is, people will always call impossible the things they don't have the courage to attempt themselves. Let them doubt you. Let them whisper. Because the ones who laugh today will one day call it inspiration. But until that day comes, you have to walk through the shadows alone. You'll face mornings where it feels pointless to keep trying, where you stare at the mirror and see a stranger tired, uncertain, heavy with the weight of invisible work. That's when the test begins. That's when life asks, do you still believe in yourself when no one else does? The answer cannot come from their applause. It has to come from your silence, that deep, steady place inside that whispers, I'm not done yet. You see, when everyone doubts you, you're actually standing on sacred ground. Because in that space, stripped of approval and praise, you meet your truest self, the one who doesn't need to perform, the one who doesn't chase validation, the one who simply is. And that's the self who will rise, quietly, powerfully, without permission. There's something strange that happens when you stop trying to convince people to believe in you. At first, it feels like surrender, like you've given up. But then, slowly, something shifts. You begin to see how much energy you've been wasting trying to prove your worth to those who never wanted to understand you in the first place. You realize that their doubt was never really about you. It was about them, their limits, their fears, their inability to imagine something beyond what they've seen before. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But no one tells you that becoming yourself will often mean disappointing others. It will mean being misunderstood. It will mean walking away from circles that once made you feel safe. Because to become who you truly are, you have to stop trying to be what the world prefers. There will come a night when you sit alone, not lonely, but alone, and it will hit you that you no longer need anyone's permission to exist as you are. You'll look around and realize that all the people who doubted you are gone, and all that's left is you, standing in the quiet with nothing but your own breath. And for the first time, that silence won't scare you. It will feel like freedom. That's the secret no one tells you about self-belief. It doesn't roar. It whispers. It doesn't announce itself with grand gestures. It arrives in small, still moments when you choose to try again even after failing, when you show up for yourself without anyone watching, when you refuse to dim your light just to fit into someone else's shadow. There's a kind of beauty in being doubted, because when you're doubted, you have nothing to lose. And when you have nothing to lose, you start taking real risks. You stop hiding, you stop shrinking, you stop pretending, you live. The world has a strange way of testing those who carry light. It will throw obstacles in your path. It will make you question your purpose. It will surround you with people who don't understand the fire in your chest. But that's only because the world doesn't reward potential. It rewards persistence. So you keep going, you keep building, you keep believing, quietly and stubbornly. Because one day, the same people who doubted you will ask how you did it, and you'll smile, not with arrogance, but with the gentle understanding that you no longer need them to see what you've known all along, that you were never waiting for their approval. You were waiting for your own courage to arrive. And it just did. There comes a point when the ache of being misunderstood becomes familiar, like a scar you've stopped tracing. You start to realize that loneliness isn't always a punishment. Sometimes it's a passage, a sacred in-between where your old self dissolves and your true self begins to emerge. At first, it feels like losing everything. You might notice how people grow distant when you stop playing small, how conversations fade when you start talking about things that matter to you, how the ones who once celebrated your light begin to turn away when it shines too brightly. It hurts deeply, but that pain is not the end, it's the clearing. Because somewhere in that space of doubt and isolation, something inside you begins to shift. You start asking quieter questions, not, why don't they believe in me? But, do I believe in me? Not, why don't they see my worth? But, have I been seeing it myself? And this is where the real transformation happens, in the unseen, unshared moments. When you wake up early just to move one step forward. When you practice in silence, create in solitude, love without being noticed. That's the kind of work that shapes legends, the kind done in the dark long before the world ever sees the light. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we hide because we fear they're unlovable. But what if the shadow isn't your enemy? What if it's your teacher? The part of you that has been hurt, doubted, or dismissed, that's where your depth is born. That's where your resilience takes root. You see, when everyone doubts you, you're forced to choose. Shrink back into the version of yourself they can accept, or step into the version they'll never understand. The second path is harder. It costs more, but it's the only one that leads you home. There's power in that kind of defiance, not loud rebellion, but quiet certainty. It's the way you start carrying yourself differently, even when no one notices. The way your silence becomes strength instead of fear. The way your presence starts to say, without words, I don't need your belief to exist. You stop begging for recognition and start creating from truth. You stop chasing and start becoming. And that's when something miraculous begins to happen. Life starts aligning with you not because you've proven yourself to anyone, but because you've finally stopped betraying yourself for their comfort. It's strange, isn't it? The moment you stop needing people to see you, they start to. The energy shifts. You walk into rooms and they can feel it, that quiet confidence that can't be faked, that peace that comes from knowing who you are. That's when you've crossed the invisible line, from being doubted to being undeniable. And when that shift finally happens, you don't celebrate the way you thought you would. There's no grand applause, no cinematic music. It's quieter than that, softer. You simply wake up one morning and realize you no longer need to explain yourself. You no longer crave to be understood by everyone. You no longer bend yourself into shapes to be accepted. You've made peace with the truth that some people will never believe in you, and that it's not your job to convince them. Your job is to keep becoming. That's the real freedom, when your worth no longer depends on their recognition, when you can look at your reflection and feel proud, even if no one else claps, when you can say, I am enough, not because someone told you so, but because you've lived through enough nights of doubt to know it for yourself. Carl Jung believed that what we resist persists, that the parts of ourselves we reject are the ones that secretly run our lives. When you're constantly fighting against doubt, you end up feeding it. But when you embrace it, when you look it in the eye and say, I see you, but you don't control me, something changes. Doubt becomes your companion, not your cage. Every great person you admire, every artist, thinker, leader, carried that same uncertainty. They weren't fearless. They were simply unwilling to stop. They understood that progress isn't about confidence. It's about commitment. It's showing up again and again, even when you're terrified, even when no one's watching, even when the world's silence feels unbearable. You become your own witness. And as you walk further down this road, you begin to understand something else, that being doubted gave you a strange kind of power. It made you self-reliant. It made you resourceful. It forced you to listen to your intuition when no one else would. It made you build strength from the inside out. One day, those who doubted you will watch from a distance. They'll see the quiet glow around you, not the loud success they expected, but something deeper, a calm assurance, a sense of purpose that can't be taken away. They'll wonder how you did it, how you survived the storms that were meant to break you. And maybe, for a brief moment, they'll feel what you once felt, the sting of self-doubt, the ache of being unseen. But you won't hold resentment. You'll just smile, because you'll understand now their doubt was the seed of your becoming. The truth is, you never needed them to believe in you. You only needed them to doubt you long enough for you to remember that you already had everything you needed inside. There will always be a moment, somewhere in the quiet stretch of your journey, when you realize that doubt was never your enemy. It was your invitation, an initiation into the kind of strength that no encouragement could have ever built. You see, people often imagine growth as something radiant and full of light. But real growth? It's messy. It's lonely. It happens in the dark, in the nights when you question if you've lost your way completely. It's born in those hours when the world is asleep and you're still awake, chasing something that no one else can see but you. It's not easy to hold on when everyone around you seems to be moving faster, doing better, achieving more. You scroll through the endless highlight reels of other people's lives, and your heart sinks. You start comparing their visible victories to your invisible battles. You forget that your story is unfolding at its own pace, that your timing has never been late, only different. Carl Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And he was right, because to truly believe in yourself means to face not just your potential, but your pain. It means admitting that you've been scared, that you've failed, that you've doubted your worth so many times you lost count, and yet you're still here. That's no small thing. That's evidence of a strength most people never recognize in themselves. Maybe that's why the universe allows doubt, because without it, you'd never dig deep enough to find who you really are. Without resistance, there's no revelation. Without pressure, no diamond ever forms. Think about it. The people who've left the deepest marks on the world were rarely the ones cheered on from the start. They were the misfits, the misunderstood, the underestimated. They were told no so many times that no became their fuel. They didn't wait for the world to open its doors, they built their own. You might not realize it yet, but that's exactly what you're doing. Every time you show up, despite being unseen, every time you keep moving when no one's clapping, you're building something sacred. You're shaping a version of yourself that no one can take away because it was forged, not given. And when the day finally comes, when the world starts to notice, you won't feel the need to say, "I told you so." You'll just keep walking, steady and sure, knowing that the journey itself already proved your worth. Because the truth is, you didn't get ahead in spite of everyone doubting you. You got ahead because of it. The doubt wasn't a detour, it was the path. When you finally understand that doubt is not an obstacle but an ally, something inside you softens. You stop fighting so hard to be seen. You start realizing that the world's disbelief was never a reflection of your lack, it was a mirror for theirs. You look back at all those moments, the laughter behind your back, the pitying looks, the comments that sounded supportive but carried poison underneath, and instead of feeling anger, you feel gratitude. Because if they had believed in you too soon, you might have stopped there. You might have settled for being understood instead of becoming unstoppable. Carl Jung once wrote that what you most need will be found where you least want to look. And that's exactly where doubt lives, in the cracks of your confidence, in the corners of your fear, in the questions that haunt you at 3 a.m. It's not there to break you. It's there to show you what you're made of. You start to see that every time someone told you, you can't, life was really asking, will you? Every time you were left out, forgotten, or rejected, life was whispering, good, now watch what happens when it's just you. Because when it's just you, something changes. You stop waiting for the right time, the right people, the right approval. You begin, imperfectly, awkwardly, but honestly. You take the small step that no one notices, the quiet risk that no one claps for, and slowly, the energy shifts. You stop existing for validation and start living from vision. This is the moment when the impossible starts to breathe. The silence that once scared you becomes a sanctuary. You find comfort in your own company. You begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time, peace. Not because the world finally understands you, but because you finally understand yourself. And then, almost without realizing it, you start to rise. Not in a dramatic, overnight way, but in a steady, grounded way like dawn. Your work begins to speak louder than your words. Your presence starts to carry a quiet confidence that no one can fake. You walk differently, you breathe differently. And people notice. The same ones who once doubted you now lean in, curious. They ask how you did it, as if there's a secret. But there isn't. You just didn't give up when they did. You kept walking when they stopped watching. You kept believing when it would have been easier to quit. That's what separates those who rise from those who fade. Not talent, not luck, but endurance. The willingness to keep showing up in the dark until light becomes inevitable. And here you are, still standing, still becoming, still burning with quiet fire. You got ahead not by being seen, but by staying true when no one was looking. And now, the world begins to see what you've become. The same silence that once hurt you becomes the soundtrack of your arrival. But you don't rush to announce it, you don't need to. Because real power never screams, it hums. It moves quietly, unbothered, like a river that has finally found its direction. You walk through the same places that once made you feel small, but they don't hold power over you anymore. You've outgrown the version of yourself that begged for understanding. You've outgrown the desperation to prove your worth. And when you look at the faces of those who once doubted you, you no longer see enemies. You see mirrors, reflections of who you used to be before you found your courage. That's the beauty of awakening. It turns your pain into compassion. You begin to understand that people doubt what they don't recognize in themselves. They saw your potential and mistook it for arrogance because they hadn't yet met their own. Their disbelief was never hatred, it was fear. And you, without realizing it, became the proof that their fear was wrong. Carl Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." And that's what your journey taught you, that not everyone will understand the path meant for you, because it wasn't built for their feet. You stopped asking them to walk it. You started walking alone. And somewhere along that lonely road, you discovered something far more powerful than approval piece. The kind that doesn't depend on praise, the kind that doesn't disappear when you fail. You began to live not for applause, but for alignment. Not for recognition, but for truth. Now, when life throws doubt your way, you smile. Because you've learned that doubt is just the universe checking if you still remember who you are. You no longer shrink when people question your dreams. You no longer break when the road gets hard. You've walked through storms that would have destroyed the person you used to be, and you made it. There's something quietly magnificent about that kind of survival. The strength that comes from staying when it would have been easier to leave. The courage to keep moving when no one was cheering. The grace to forgive when you could have closed your heart forever. And now, here you are, living proof that belief born in solitude is the strongest kind of belief there is. You've learned to carry your own fire, to be your own validation, to build your own peace. You no longer wait for anyone to believe in you. You are the belief. You've become what they could not imagine, a person who kept going. There's a moment, quiet but unmistakable, when everything inside you settles, not because the road has become easy, but because you've stopped fighting yourself. You realize that the war was never between you and the world. It was between who you were told to be and who you truly are. And when that truth finally lands, it doesn't explode. It exhales. It feels like peace, like coming home after a long journey through noise and doubt. You no longer crave to be ahead of anyone. You just want to be whole. Carl Jung often spoke about individuation, the process of becoming your true self. But what that really means, beneath all the psychology and poetry, is this. You stop running from yourself. You stop abandoning the parts of you that feel too much, too strange, too sensitive. You let yourself be seen by you. Because that's what happens when everyone doubts you. You're forced inward. And when you go inward long enough, you stop searching for love in the wrong places. You start realizing that the love you've been chasing is the love you were meant to give yourself. You look back on the years you spent over-explaining, overworking, overcompensating, all because you wanted to be taken seriously. You remember how it felt to have your ideas dismissed, your emotions misunderstood. You remember crying quietly, wondering if maybe you were the problem. But you weren't. You were simply blooming in a place that couldn't recognize your season. Now you see it clearly. You were never behind. You were being prepared. Every moment of doubt was sharpening your voice. Every rejection was redirecting your path. Every silence was strengthening your spirit. The people who doubted you gave you the greatest gift of all, the chance to define yourself without their help. They forced you to listen to your own voice, to trust your own rhythm, to stand tall in your own truth. And that's how you got ahead. Not by being louder, not by being perfect, but by being real. When others chased validation, you chased meaning. When they sought comfort, you sought growth. When they gave up, you stayed. That's what separates the ones who fade from the ones who leave something behind. You've learned that doubt will always exist from others, from the world, from within, but it no longer controls you. It no longer shapes your steps. You've walked through the fire of disbelief and come out with something unshakable, self-trust. And now, when you speak, your words carry weight, not because people finally listen, but because you no longer need them to. You've turned your wounds into wisdom, your silence into strength, your doubt into direction. That is how you get ahead when everyone doubts you, by realizing that ahead was never a destination. It was a state of becoming. And when you reach that point of becoming not the peak the world celebrates, but the quiet summit within you, realize something profound. You were never trying to prove them wrong. You were trying to prove yourself right. You were trying to remember that small, trembling belief you had before the world told you to be realistic. It's strange, isn't it? The same world that once doubted you now admires you. They speak of your persistence as if it were effortless, forgetting the nights you almost gave up. They praise your strength, not realizing it was born from years of feeling unseen, but you don't correct them. You don't need to. Because deep down, you know that what truly matters can't be explained, it can only be lived. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And that's exactly what you did. You stopped chasing the world's version of success and turned inward. You stopped needing to be validated and started wanting to be whole. You discovered that getting ahead isn't about speed, it's about alignment. It's about walking in step with your truth, no matter how slowly it takes you there. You've learned to love the silence now. The same quiet that once made you feel forgotten has become the space where your creativity breathes. You've learned to honor your rhythm, to work when your heart says move, to rest when your soul says stop. You no longer run from stillness because you've learned it's where you hear your own voice the loudest. And that voice, the one you doubted, silenced, and ignored, is no longer small. It has grown roots. It has become steady. It guides you now, like a compass pointing towards something greater than approval piece. You understand now that being doubted wasn't a curse. It was a cleansing. It stripped away the noise, the pretenses, the illusions of who you thought you had to be. It made you honest. It made you brave. It made you human. And maybe that's the greatest victory of all, not that you proved them wrong, but that you proved to yourself that you could live without their permission. So if someone out there doubts you now, let them. If they mock you, let them. If they leave, let them. You no longer chase those who can't see your light. You just keep walking calmly, slowly, deliberately in the direction of your truth. Because you've learned that the real race isn't against others. It's against your own hesitation. And you're finally winning. You're ahead not in comparison, but in courage. Not in fame, but in freedom. Not in recognition, but in authenticity. You've become the proof that doubt can't destroy the person who has already decided to rise. And when you finally stand in that quiet space, not triumphant, but peaceful, something extraordinary happens. You realize that the very people who doubted you were necessary. They were the friction that sparked your fire. Without them, you might never have learned how to stand alone. Without their disbelief, you might never have discovered your depth. You see now that doubt was never the opposite of belief. It was its birthplace. Every whisper of, "you can't," was the echo that pushed you to whisper back, "watch me." Every rejection was a redirection. Every closed door a quiet protection. Life was never working against you. It was working through you, sculpting, shaping, softening you into the person you were meant to become. Carl Jung said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That's what you did. You faced the parts of yourself that were afraid, unsure, insecure, and instead of hiding them, you brought them into the light. You made peace with your own shadows. And from that acceptance, something beautiful was born. Wholeness. Now, when you wake up, you don't chase, meaning you embody it. You don't crave certainty, you create it. You don't need the world's approval. You are the approval. Your steps are no longer rushed. They are rhythmic, deliberate, sacred. And as you walk through the world now, people feel it. They can sense that something in you has changed. They can't quite name it, but they feel safer in your presence. You've become grounded, not because life got easier, but because you stopped needing it to be. You've learned how to live in uncertainty without losing faith. You've learned how to love without expecting anything in return. You've learned how to trust yourself in the silence. That's how you truly get ahead, not by outpacing others, but by outgrowing your own fear. Not by demanding recognition, but by becoming undeniable through the quiet consistency of self-belief. You understand now that being doubted was not the tragedy, being shaped by doubt was the transformation. Every heartbreak, every dismissal, every lonely night was a thread in the tapestry of your becoming. So if you're listening to this right now, sitting alone, wondering if you'll ever be seen, if you'll ever be enough breathe, you already are. The fact that you're still here, still trying, still believing in something the world can't see yet, that's your proof. You are the living embodiment of persistence, the kind that doesn't shout but stays, the kind that doesn't seek but builds, the kind that turns doubt into destiny. And when the world finally catches up to you, when they start to see what was always there, you won't feel the need to gloat. You'll simply smile, because you'll know that everything unfolded exactly as it was meant to. You didn't just get ahead, you became whole. Thank you for walking this path with me tonight. If these words found their way to your heart, if they reminded you of your strength, your worth, your quiet fire, stay. There's more healing, more truth, more light waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, or simply sit with these words a little longer. And remember, you were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to become undeniable, even in silence.